Today we're building platforms, and with some great reference material from a preserved railway, things haven't really gone to plan. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie, and this week it's all about the branch line station. Now, in the last video I used these pretty nifty rail aligners from Model Tech, and as you can see here, I've now installed all 5 tracks with those little rail aligners. A marvellous device if you need to split your boards. And just to prove the sort of proof of the pudding is in the eating, I'll send my little DMUs on their way. Now, as you can see, both those 2 platform lines work perfectly well, and so do the 3 freight lines. But it is of course worth mentioning the wiring. Now down here we can see that I've got one of those simple plug connectors, and these are available from squirestools.com. But please remember to wire them the right way around, and that is the supply should be on the female in case there's a short across any of the pins. So if you remember that saying, the female has the power. Nothing new there then. So we know the board is good, it's all wired up, and we can disconnect it and take it off, and I can now work on it over on a couple of trestles and get right around it. But what am I trying to achieve? Well, the overview of this sort of area is there'll be 3-storey Victorian tenement houses, or the backs of them along here. There'll be a platform structure down the middle, and this will be platform 1A and 1B, and accordingly 2A and 2B. But I'm also going to build a gully platform. Now, if you're not all about on gully platforms, nor was I till recently, to be perfectly honest, so just use these as placeholders a moment. So that's the platform that will serve those 2. But with a gully platform, in older trains you could get out of the train either side. You can't do that today because the guard will open the doors either on one side or the other. But in gully platforms it was up to the passengers really which side they chose to get out, and they could walk around or over a bridge or whatever. And here you can see a gully platform that's still in use today at Yeovil Pen Mill. Of course, the guard will only unlock one side of the doors. Right, so what are our options about building? Well, the first thing I'm going to do now is get this board onto the trestles, and then we'll have a look at our options. Now here we are with the board on trestles. Now, I've taken some advice from a subscriber, and that is to install a piece of disused track on this board, and it will go in place just here. Now, you may have seen these before. I know I use them all the time. These are Pico 6-foot way gauges. They are extremely useful. There's lugs on either side. At the top, these wide lugs are for set track, and the smaller ones, the closer ones, are for streamline. So if I use the smaller lugs, I can then get the correct spacing on this piece of track. Lovely. Now, I want the end of this track to coincide with the ends of these, so I need to shove him forward a bit to about there. Keep him up straight. Lovely. And then I just need to secure this to the baseboard. And as usual, I will just secure this piece of track in place until it's ballasted with some small screws that I acquired from Maria's shop down in Devon called Buffers, quite close to Axminster. Anyway, pop these little screws in. Now with this piece of track, I can't guarantee what's going to happen to it. It may keep the rails, it might just be overgrown, I might tear the rails up and just leave the sleepers, or just some of them. But the main thing is, that's where it's going to sit, and it will all be covered in grass and everything else. Now before we build our platforms, clearly we need to talk about platform height. And when I say platform height, I mean the height from the bottom of the sleepers to the top of the platform deck. So that needs to be a constant figure, and across the railways it's kind of constant, as when the coaches pull up and you get out your train, they're generally about the same sort of step down to the platform. So we need to figure out what this is. Well, historically, in new money, that sounds the wrong way around, doesn't it? It's 19 millimeters, and let me show you how that's attained. Now, most of us may have started our modelling with these Hornby platform sections, and they've got a kind of a manhole cover in the middle and holes for the canopy, nice big white stripe. But when you put a vernier caliper on them, you realise they come in at 19 millimeters, or in this case 19.01. Now this is the addition from Pico. Now this one here has these kind of reinforced concrete look about it, and I think this came in the sort of late 50s, early 60s. But again, when I put a vernier caliper on it, it comes in at, bear with me, 19.2. Of course, if you don't want that look, Pico also do a smooth side in which you can stick paper which has a brick print on it. All good stuff. And then I'll come back to this, the 6 foot weigh gauge again, because the 6 foot weigh gauge is from the one lug to the other lug is 19 millimeters, which is useful really, because then it shows you when you put this down, these platforms are all level with the top of that lug. 19 millimeters, a beautiful number. Now, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to use 18 millimeter ply. Now, there's nothing like being able to take inspiration from a preserved railway, and near me there is one up at Cranmore called the East Somerset Railway. Beautiful, and it's a small Great Western preserved arrangement. And next to this remarkable signal box to the east, we can see a platform. This platform is in remarkable condition, but then again, it was only built a couple of years before the COVID outbreak, so this is a brand new addition. However, on the other side at platform 1, things are far more interesting. We've got all the detritus here, we've got the point rodding, and we've got the cables to operate the signals. And of course, we have years and years of weathering and abuse that this area has kind of suffered, as it were. Lovely to see all the little things like the fire buckets, all that kind of stuff associated with a preserved railway. Looking from the other end, note the gap between the sleeper and the wall of the platform. It's round about 2 foot. And of course you can see all the other detritus, including a 3-link coupling discarded. Then looking at the centre of the platform, we can see the makeup of the rows of bricks. And if we look a little closer, we can see that there's a row of long bricks, let's say, and then a row of short bricks followed by a row of long and a row of short. So what's all that about, and how can we replicate that on our own railway? Now, we all like a visual aid. Now, this is what you say in the UK is a standard brick size. Now, this distance here, this face is known as the stretcher, and this is known as the header. And this face here is the same distance as 2 headers with a course of render through the middle. And also it's the same as 3 headers vertically. And you can see on this image here the way it works out, as you have the examples both of the stretchers and the headers and the bricks placed vertically at the top of this wall. Now I'm going to go for the same as the Cranmore Platform 1 look on my layout, and the reason I'm going to do it in plasticard is because if I were to use paper, then when I go to ballast, you'll find that the water from the ballast glue can easily run up the paper and it'll come off. But if I use plasticard, I'll get a far more realistic, well, I hope to get a far more realistic result. Now, armed with that information from Cranmore, we know that I'm after a 2-foot gap from the sleepers to the platform on both sides. This being 00 gauge, which is 4mm to the foot. So if I'm coming in 2 foot, that'll be 8mm. 8mm both sides is 16mm. The gap between the sleepers is 84. So 84mm minus the 16 gives 84, 74, 68. So therefore I need to cut my timbers so they are 68mm wide on this particular platform. Now I really can't tell you how to cut your timber, but I can tell you that safety is paramount. And as you can see, I've made some progress. So we have our 2 platforms. This one has the ramp. This one doesn't, because this one will go on to the next board and there's a ramp down and a signal on the top here. And at the other end, we've got the base for the potential branch line station, which will go there. So there we go, kind of all straightforward. Now, I mentioned about the plasticard, so we need to now change our focus onto getting the plasticard cut and glued and put onto this platform. Now, using this pump house building from Bachmann, hopefully you can see that the scales are the same. Now, it's always useful to be able to compare the scale of your brickwork when you go along to the model shop to buy it. Obviously this is a bit on the large side, so perhaps something like this little Bachmann line side shack might be a better example. But all we can tell is that this is the right scale. So I now have the arduous task of cutting this plasticard into strips, and I'm going to go for strips of 17mm so that they'll be just a little bit shorter than the timber of the platforms. I'm also going to cut another couple of strips so to try and replicate the effect of where the platform comes out. As you can see at Cranmore, you can see there's a couple of courses bricks that stand out from the sort of vertical face. So I shall be back in a few hours' time. I thought it might be easier to scribe the line out with a pencil and then just undercut it with the scalpel blade. So I come down a course of bricks and then run the scalpel blade across. That'll do us, and then we glue it along the top surface, and obviously the bottom there will be covered with ballast. Right, and now I want to get a couple of other smaller strips to go along the top to bring it out. Right, ready to go. We have Rocket Rapid straight from the fridge. We have a superglue debonding agent in case it all goes to rats. A little bit of polythene, on which I decant a little super glue, because on polythene it doesn't cure. It kind of stays liquid for hours. And I've got some cocktail strips to help put it on. Here are my 3 strips. Now what I tend to do is just put it straight onto the plastic and then try to get it as thin as I possibly can, and then with a cocktail stick run down. Then hopefully I won't get in a mess, don't bet on it. But at the end of the day, it's only a few strips of plastic, and if I make a complete mess of it, then I can just go and cut another strip. I'm unsure how well, I was going to say how much the super glue sticks to these gloves, but I can rest assured it does. Okay, here's the first one in place. Doesn't look too bad. And then the second. The trick is really, I think, not to put too much on in the first place. As you can see, this is going to be a lengthy, tedious job when you consider the amount of lengths I've got to do. God, it's sticking all over the place. Okay, here's the second one. Right, I dread to think how many I've got to do. Now I was going to try and glue these in with Evo stick, but I must confess I changed my mind. I'm in a kind of super glue mood now. So let me just check that that fits well against there. Yep, good enough. I would feel less confident if I didn't have that superglue debonding agent close at hand. There we are, easy as that. And there is a small line here you can see, but nothing that the ballast can't hide. Now I've just got a little bit of work to do around here to make sure it sort of flows downhill, so a little bit of fettling there. Well, it's a little bit rough in places, but nothing that a coat or two from the airbrush in a brick colour won't sort out, and maybe a little bit of filler if necessary. But at the end of the day, I think we're good to go. And I've done both sides, and I must confess it seems okay. The joints are let's say, a little rough, but I'm sure with a little bit of weathering powder and the rest of it will be fine. So I'm going to, off camera, I'm going to quickly blow a coat of sort of a red bricky kind of colour dark over this lot, and then we can set about the platform surface. Now, as you can see, I've now a little light airbrushing on the surface of the platform, and I used Railmatch Acrylic 2405 Dark Rust. And why did I use Dark Rust? Well, I didn't have anything else lying around really. I just knew it was a kind of red colour, so I just whapped it on there. Now, what I have done is I've sort of weathered or used a wash on the other side, and it's come out quite well. So what I thought I'd do, I'll just do the other side and show you exactly what I did. Now with a fairly wide brush, what am I using? Well, I'm using Humbrol's dark brown enamel wash, and after a good shake, because these tend to sort of clag up at the bottom, all I'm doing is with that wide brush is just whap it on there, and there's no technique in this whatsoever. Just get it and paint it on. Make a note of the time, because what I do is leave it 3 or 4 minutes and then wipe it off again. Now, it doesn't seem to be any effect putting this enamel wash on top of an acrylic paint. It all seems absolutely fine. But just to make sure, if you're going to construct it the same way I have, that you get the enamel wash into the sort of grooves of where you staggered the platform at the top when you put it on in 2 or 3 layers to give it a more realistic feel. So that's about it, and I'll see you in 3 or 4 minutes time. Now 5 minutes or so has gone by, so now it's just a case of giving it a wipe. Now I wipe it sort of carefully really, because if you remember those photographs at Cranmore, the lower part of the brickwork appeared lighter than the dark, and that's quite a simple reason for that, is because it's in shadow because of the overhang of the platform stones. So I naturally then just take off a little more from the bottom than I do at the top. And let's be honest, if you make a pig's ear, as they say, of this, it's no big deal, is it? You just go and whack some more on, or take a bit of thinners and take some off. You can't really go wrong, but there we are, and hopefully you'll agree that that is much better. I will take some off the top still, just a little bit, and you can sort of weather it with that wash to your heart's content until you've got the effect that you're after. Lovely. So I'll let that dry, and then of course we've got to tackle what we're going to do with the top surface. Well, it's now the following day, and it's worth talking about money because up to now I've paid out about £5, and it's mainly with 2 sheets of Slater's brick plastic card sort of thing. The rest of it is just bit offcuts of timber. But it does change today. Now, what's happened since I was with you last is I've got that piece of platform and I've screwed it to the bottom of this baseboard. The screws are a bit long, so I need to grind the other ends off when I tip it on its side. But it's worth talking about now is what I'm going to use on the edges of the platform. Now, I've taken inspiration from Richard at Everard Junction on a video that he did using tiny ceramic tiles, as it were. Now, these tiles are 11mm square by 1mm thick. And what he did was he placed them all along the edges of his platforms, which is exactly what I intend to do. And the cost of these things, it's obviously worth mentioning, is I paid £33.20 for 420 of these smaller ones. And I thought just to change it up a little bit, I bought a bag of 5mm by 11, and there's only 60 in there, so that all comes in at £33.20. So there is some expense here, but I thought I would kind of try this and see what it looks like. If it doesn't work, I can always scrap it and on your behalf try something else. Lovely. But how far does your overhanging slabs go from your platform to make a decent visual arrangement with your passing rolling stock? Now, I came across a chap on YouTube the other day called Nigel, and he runs Walls Rail, a YouTube channel, Walls Rail, and there will be a link at the end of this video, so please do check this out. Now, he's come up with this gauge, and I'll just let this sequence run.
I made some gauges out of 80 thou plasticard that sit in the track. They give me a measurement of 23mm from the centre line to the edge of the brickwork and 19.5mm to the edge of the coping stone. It should be 19, and I'll explain why it's not in a moment. For anybody that's got steam engines, you'll probably be alright, or anything with coupling rods other than a Hornby or Bachmann Class 08, because they will clip the coping stones if they're set at the correct distance from the rail.
So as Nigel mentioned, he's built a gauge, cut it out of foam board, and it works perfectly well. So perhaps that's something that you also need to think about to get this overhang right. Now, I'm in a fortunate situation that I can cheat a little bit. So let's take a closer look at what's going on here. Now, as you can see, I've used a steel rule to mark out where I actually want these ceramic tiles to go. And I've placed a couple in place down at the back end. Now, interesting thing is the distance between this platform and this track is not really that relevant because this is disused, and if it's in the wrong place I can always move it. And similarly with the platform, because this is the track that is vitally important. So if I actually end up putting these minute little ceramic squares in the wrong place and I'm a bit closer or a bit far away, I can actually move this platform back and forth until it's dead right, as long as they're all at the same distance. So if I have to move it this way, it's no big deal because I can actually move this track this way because it's a redundant track. What is vital is the distance between these two tracks, because I can't get that wrong. So I've used a couple of old offcuts of rail, the real stuff, put this ruler in the right place, and now I will stick these in place with a dab of super glue and run down the length and see what it looks like. I've no idea how easily these tiles will take to this super glue, which I'm using in its deluxe Rocket Rapid. Right. I've already noticed one issue, and that's the fact that, well, I don't want to get the ruler super glued to the tiles. Now, I'm sure you've got better things to do than watch me do this. This is scoring quite highly on the monotonous scale. My worry is, have I super glued the ruler to the board? Yes, I have a little bit. Scary. Well, there we are. Now, I was wondering exactly how hard this ceramic is, and if I wanted to, could I edge them a little finer? Well, the answer is clearly yes. As you can see, they will rub down should you make a few errors, let's say, which is quite a useful asset, really. Yeah, that's pretty spiffing, isn't it? Super job. Right, one down, one to go. Now, confession time. These tiles are a lot more brittle than I had hoped, and when I was laying this second line, they were a bit low. They sort of sagged down a little bit. So I decided to break them off and redo them. But as I pushed my hand here, I snapped these 2, 4, 6 over here. So yes, you've got to be very careful. So much so that I could not possibly recommend that you use these tiles for platform edging. If you want to use it in the middle of a shopping centre or a street or whatever, then absolutely fine, because there's no chance of you breaking them off. But because the way they're used on the platform edge, they overhang, all you've got to do is press it and they'll snap away. Now I cannot possibly see this having any longevity. If I lean across the layout to do something, and I break one of these off because, you know, this train is derailed or whatever, it will be a so-and-so, you know, to change. Now, it might be because I've made a mistake by using super glue to glue them on, and perhaps I should have used a glue that's much more soft, let's say. There's little doubt in my mind that when I ballast this area, I will break some off. Let's draw stumps on these. These tiles are no good for platform edging. I mean, fair play to Richard of Everard Junction if he can get away with not breaking his, but I'm certainly not going to go down this avenue. What have I wasted besides 3 days of my life putting this video together and doing these? Well, that's not quite true because I obviously did the edging and that was useful, but I doubt very much if this piece of timber is retrievable because I've used super glue. I doubt very much if I will be able to get these tiles off and leave the timber in a smooth manner for me to carry on. I might be able to remove the wall cladding that I put on the side of the platform. That might be useful, but I think it's time to draw stumps, and certainly for this piece of platform here, I will go down the scribed plasticard route, where you get a strip of plasticard, you sort of scribe the lines of the stones and you glue that in place. That is a much more sensible way forward. There we go. What a complete, it was not a complete waste of time. Half the video was okay. It was just this half, and it might look good to you, but it's a so-and-so. It's wavy, trying to get them level with a decent overhang, because obviously if you put it back down too far, and as you can see, the lines are all over the place. It's time for a bit of honesty. Don't go down this avenue. Don't waste your life faffing around with these wonderful ceramic tiles. It's a no-no. In fact, let's take it a stage further. So I want to pick up this shunter, and how easy is it to break? You could run a hoover along here and they just break away. This is not good at all. I'm sure next week we'll have platforms take 2. If you've got any advice to share, then please leave it down in the comments section on the way you've made your platforms, so as a community we can all learn together. Lovely. Anyway, if you've enjoyed it, please give us a thumbs up, and if you're not a subscriber, then please consider hitting the old subscriber button. After all, it's free. There's the patrons button. Thank you very much, patrons. You make it all possible. Video here and here. See you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye bye.